Hi, my name is Caesar Williams, and I am the Artistic Director of the Fire This Time Festival in New York City. And we are so proud to have partnered with two dope LA-based performing arts organizations, Watts Village Theater Company and Center Theater Group, in order to bring you not a moment, but a movement, a series of events designed to amplify Black artists and their voices. And I am excited to welcome you to our third episode and our opening night panel discussion, Art and Social Justice, Intersecting Onstage and Beyond. This conversation will immediately be followed by a sneak peek or a free viewing of Roger Q. Mason's The Duat, which is the third episode in this series. And to lead us in this conversation, we have artist, actor, musician, and activist, Antonio David Lyons. Enjoy.
Greetings. Thank you all for having me. Glad that you're joining us for this conversation, which I imagine will be quite rich. My name is Antonio David Lyons. I'm greeting you from the land of the Tonga people, and I am he, him, his. And this is the third installment of Not a Moment, but a Movement. And we're having a conversation today about art and social justice, intersecting on stage and beyond. And we are joined today by three amazing panelists who will be a deep dive conversation into who they are in their art and our theme for today. We'd like to go ahead and invite our first panelist, Azure. Azure, please tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you, Antonio. So my name is Azure D, Osborne-Lee. My pronouns are he and they, and I'm based on unceded Lenape territory or New York City. I'm a theater maker and I primarily focus on playwriting, do a little bit of producing, but you know, if the price is right, I'll do just about anything. I'm also an educator. I've been working in higher education for a couple of years. And what else? What do I hope for the world? Ooh, I'm always hoping that people will rededicate themselves to social justice and, you know, get that in gear.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you. Dominique Morisseau.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dominique Morisseau, and I am dialing in, StreamYarding in from the unceded land of the Tonga Chumash people. Antonio, we on the same unceded land, otherwise known as Los Angeles to some folks. And I'm a playwright. I'm a television writer, an actor, a poet, an activist, and a mama, and a wife. And so, yeah, and I think of import to me lately. I'm also a disgruntled aging chick. That's what I am, and I'm okay with that. Agitated by many things, foolishness, and I am hoping to always be a contributor to any kind of equity and justice, but also student of the world and of my elders.
That's it. Thank you. Jonathan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jonathan McCrory. My pronouns are he, him. My spirit is a she. I am StreamYarding in. It's like you're always on Zoom, so I'm just like, always Zoom. I'm streaming live and in living color from the unceded land of the Lenape people, also known as Harlem, New York. If I was to say what I do, I'm the executive artistic director of Dr. Barbara Antier's National Black Theater. Also like to be known as a creative doula. What is my hope for the world? My hope is that the world gets to know joy and falls in love with joy as a way in which to have a fulfilled life.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you all for that.
Thank you. And can I just also say that my pronoun, I'll be putting it in the thing and then I just always forget to say it. So I'm just going to share my pronoun. Thank you.
You're welcome. I know that you all are familiar with each other, and I'm familiar with you all as well. And I really want to just dive in deep and not be like a kind of surface conversation. So my first question in terms of my curiosity is, where and how was the birthing of your artistry and your activism? And anyone who wants to jump in, jump in. Yeah.
I mean, I would say I could dive in and just say the birthing of my activism as a cognitive space of where I had to be actively engaged with my own kind of survival and survival of others outside of myself really landed when I got diagnosed with ADD, dyslexia, and another form of mental learning disability, and had to fight for my own education. Told that I wasn't going to be able to go to college or be able to actually excel. My parents were actually told that they should prepare for me not to be able to be a self-sustaining individual on this planet. And I think that was a birthing of my need to survive, my need to create alternative spaces that defied the language that I was casted to be. And I think that activated me to shift and I was blessed to have a family, a mother and a father and a village that allowed for me to rail against that machine and gave me the resources to do that. So I would say and when you asked that, I was like, where did that start come from? I think that came from that moment, that very intentional moment.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you. Dominique, Azure?
I think that my artistic awakening for me happened at around 12. That's when I got to join drama club in middle school, and middle school was also a really formative time for me. I think when I think about activism, I think about people-to-people interactions, right? And I think a lot about how important it was for me to have friends who are neurodivergent, and to treat them with dignity and humanity, and how other people in the school took note of that, and said, well, oh, I couldn't do that, right? Things like making a choice to eat with the person who would otherwise have to eat lunch alone, and making options for this person to be able to have fun interactions that weren't awkward, right? And they're not ostracized. And I feel like that's very much a part of my ethos still, is about making sure that people's basic needs are met, right? And getting to know people on a one-to-one level so that you can really, dig deep with people and really make sure that they're good and that they feel comfortable saying when they're not. And so for me, that all started to emerge when I was about 12 years old.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you. Yes. Dominique.
I love this because I remember hearing an activist speak many years ago, about 20 years ago now. Well, maybe it wasn't that long, but in New York, and she was talking about when she first became an activist, and she started talking about grade school and how she was a queer woman and didn't know it at the time. She was a little girl. She had a crush on this girl in her class, and when the boy would pick on her, all the girls, she would rally and get all the girls to stand up, against the boy that was bullying the girl. The girl that she had a crush on. And she's like, and I didn't know I was queer then, but I guess I also didn't know I was an activist then. That was her. And I was like, damn, do I have I was thinking is it that young? Is it always that young? And I think, yeah, well, when you put it like that, then I have to go back to every part of being a kid. What was so pure about her story for me was that it was, it's unfair when things are unfair. If you have the core in you to go, that's not fair. That is part of the strike of being an activist, I think. And as when I was young, I would stand up for my cousins, or I would just something wasn't right. I stand up to my parents, all the time. Actually, that's not fair. That's not right. It's mouthy. But I got that. What I did not know, and you sort of when you lose a parent. And I have lost my father this past year. I lost my mother-in-law, I lost my grandma, I lost many elders in my life. But when you lose a parent, you start figuring stuff out in reverse, through like things that they leave behind. And I have found like these letters my father wrote. My father was a scholar, but I knew these things when he was alive, but I had found like articles that I didn't know he wrote, or, just little letters to like the telephone company that were like way overly like articulate to just like write a bill, you know what I mean? And it was like, this is an indignity. I'm like, an indignity, Daddy, this is you know what I'm saying? But it was so extra, and I was like, oh my God, this dude raised me. Like, this has been in me since before I think I'm aware. I don't think I know. I think that seed was planted at birth. You know what I mean? It was definitely planted. I go back and I look at these videos my father took of me. That one gift he left us that was like paramount to any other is all these like videotapes. And he had that camera out like all the time, like before paparazzi was a paparazzi, My father was that in the family. And he has like these videos of me, like, coming home from school, and he'll put the camera on me. He'll be like, so what's happening in the current affairs, Dominique? And I'm like 8. And I'm like, bitch, Desmond Tutu was in Detroit today, and I'm like saying stuff like this on camera. And it's like my husband and I were watching it recently. We're like, this dude was like, I'm his robot. Like he programmed, excuse my language, he programmed me. I'm a cusser. He programmed me, and I feel kind of brainwashed, you know what I'm saying? But I'm also, I'm hooked, I guess. I got hooked.
That's right. Thank you for that. One of the things that made me ask that question is that I did that introspection for myself. I got to graduate school majoring in applied theater, and all the language they were talking about in terms of how you use this work, particularly around entering community, had been the work that my mother had always done as a community development person. And I was like, it took me all these years to come back to realize I'm what Audrey planned me to be. So I thought that was really important for us to just kind of dig a little deeper around that. And so those seeds that were planted, particularly in the moment that we're living in right now, how are they serving you? How are they serving you in the world? And how are you activating them to do the work that needs to be done? Because we're at some critical places, not only in our industry, but in our nation, in the world, around social justice issues, whether it's around ideas of race and white supremacy and environmental issues and elder care. Like, it's just, there's so much. So I'm curious about that as well for you all. Anybody?
Right. I see you.
Okay. Okay. So I just tweeted about this. My cousin is probably not watching, but she's watching. Hey, Kelly, I'm about to talk about you. So I tweeted about being the queer cousin. So my family is from Texas. Like pretty much all of my family extended on both sides lives in Texas. In various parts. And so, I saw my cousin post on Facebook something about feeling frustrated about not being able to find shoes that she likes. So on that side of my family, everybody's a giant. Like, like enormous, like 6 foot and over, like people. And so I posted some links and basically was like, let me tell you what you need to do. You need to search for drag queen shoes. Because
keep it real.
They're extended sizes, but they keep them cute, right? So I was like, boom, 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 boom. And she was like, ooh, this crystal heel. Yes, cousin, that's my, And so I just posted on Twitter something about, the queer cousin doing God's work, and this same cousin, she's my
out of a play.
Right? She's 28 days older than me, so we're both Virgos, and like just growing up, like getting into trouble together. Like we have a cousin pod, as so many like people do, from where I'm from. Like this is the cousin pod. We all get our butts whooped together just because we were doing something in the summer. My cousin was just like, wow, you really broke the mold for the family. Like you said you were going to move to New York City. Like you were going to like transition. Like you're going to be an artist. Like I'm just like out here, on top of the country, just like out doing whatever I want. And she was like, that's very inspiring. And I like love that my kids get to see that. She's got 7 kids. I ain't got none. She had all the kids for me. So, And like I send her kids books, etc. I feel like I'm getting to be who I wanted to be, but now I realize, looking back at my yearbook, people would write things like, "You so crazy, but you're yourself, stay crazy, whatever." That people really meant that they enjoyed seeing me be myself, and that allowed them to be more free. And so, yeah, I just am always trying to make those interpersonal connections and take people with me, and also just share. I always talk about redistribution of resources. That's what social justice means to me. And resources can be almost anything, right? Like information, material goods, money, like, etc. We got to be moving things around. So, dropping some knowledge, sending some books, I gave my mom a Fenty lipstick when I saw her a couple of weeks ago, and she was feeling herself, So I feel like that's the person I've always been, and I'm just growing more into myself, which allows everybody else around me to get free as well.
Free, yeah, I like that. Sure, thank you. Jonathan, Dominique, do you want to jump in on that?
I mean, what I can say, and I just love, I love that story, Azure, like 100%. Like, it's so beautiful. Kind of like your liberation liberates others, and like that sensibility. I will say my moment softened me in a lot of ways, and created a space for me to be hyper aware of my blind spots. In what ways am I, in the position that I helm, or the position that I have, there's an element of gatekeeping associated with being an executive artistic director of an institution. When you have leadership, you are a gatekeeper. And when you have resources that and then you have the opportunity to figure out how you navigate that gate. Do you keep that gate wide open? Do you keep that gate semi-open? Like, how free do you allow for the access to happen? And I think that I work diligently and tried to work consistently to navigate how I can create less barriers and more opportunities for as many folks as possible. How do I create? How do I redistribute that wealth capital that I am able to steward to as many communities and many people as possible? Knowing that distribution of wealth actually helps to shift the paradigm of who and how we can operate on this planet. And I think to exactly what Azure talked about, getting deeper inside of my own liberation and deeper inside of my own shadows, like my shadowy self, understanding my shadowy self and understanding the spaces that I need to grow in as an individual. I ultimately create multiple new universes for us to imagine into. I ultimately become the embodiment of the Afrofuturistic self because I've done the work. And I think when Azure talks about that story, their story, the chills that come to me is that I imagine a human that envisioned a future that allowed for someone to project themselves. Like you allowed folks to project themselves into the future and to find their own liberation. And when I think about, and when I know I'm casting something on all of us, when I think about all of us who are on this call, I think about how we have projected ourselves into the future in so many different ways. And because of the ways we projected ourselves in the future, it's now. It's not something that we have to, like even though we're still projecting, our conjure has already created worlds and universes.
Sure. Well, I like that. Our conjure has already created worlds and universes. And often we don't even know. Sometimes we know, but we don't know the ripple effect of that creative moment. You know what I mean? What we put out there. Thank you for that. Thank you both. Dominique?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to can you repose the question? I want to make sure I'm answering it. I've been focused on the brilliance that has been shared on this thing, and I'm like, I want to make sure I'm answering it. Well, I don't know if I'm going to answer it well, but can you pose it back out?
You had like, I wrote it down and remember it. It popped up in my
something about, well, listen, it was something about how is our activism serving us, right? Like, how's our upbringing?
Like that seed, like
I want to make sure I want to make sure I'm answering the questions.
I think it was, how did that moment serve the artist and activist that you are now?
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, by the way, while we're holding for a second, Azure, I've been saying your name Azure. Can you correct me and tell me what the correct pronunciation is?
Yes, it's Azure. It kind of rhymes with badger.
Gotcha. Connected to my mispronunciation of the actual word in life, I think. I've always liked to say deep azure, blue azure.
Yeah, well, azure. Because it's also a word in French. People like to Francify it, as I like to say, but it's also a word in English. So
yes, I like it. Okay, Azure. Thank you for the Azure. I got you. When I'm thinking about this question for a minute, it's I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how it's serving me. I mean, it's just in me. It's in my blood, right? But I don't know that I'm not so much. I don't know how effective I am. I think as I'm getting older, I have a little bit of a different space in this because I've done this a couple of decades in my life now. That feels, I hate to say it, but that's where I'm at. I'm trying to embrace my shit. So, and because I've been, I was in a different place, I think, a couple of decades ago as an activist than I am now. I didn't even call myself an activist a couple of decades ago. I was doing activist-y things, but I didn't think I could because I was an artist and I met career life activists, and those are two different things. Actually, the career activists and life activists are not the same. But the lifetime activists that I have met, I'm like they're deep in, like, they're across the globe. They're in the trenches of the so-called third world. I'm not doing all of that, right? So I didn't think I could call myself that. And then I started, as I'm emerged in my work and in my agenda in my life, which is to just be of service. I think. And to tell stories and to illuminate injustice. And I honestly that wasn't even something I thought I was doing either in my writing. There wasn't like, let me illuminate injustice. That was never a mission. I kind of learned that that's what I was doing backwards, like what your impulses are. And, sort of like when you go, hey, when did you realize you're an activist? You go, wait, was that what I was doing when I was in third grade? But it's not like, that was like not my intention. It was just, that's how I was showing up in spaces, right? So I'm recognizing, I think in this moment, now that I have embraced the term activist, it's still new for me, coming in for what would be considered maybe 20 plus years as an activist. I've only been calling myself one for maybe 3, maybe 3. And so, and that to me is starting to get a little murky for me because this is a great moment that everyone's finding their activism, right? And I think that that's fantastic. I know other people that get really annoyed with that. Lifetime activists get very annoyed with new activists, but there's always new activists on the street. That's how it goes, And in this moment that we're in, there's a call to action in this era this call that is now has always been the call for me. So I guess when I say it's like, well, how am I showing up, or how is this impacting my moment now? I've just never felt like I'm just happy everybody's getting here, because I have felt that I've been I've always been agitated by things that weren't really popular to be agitated about. And I'm not saying like, I've been doing the work, you ain't been doing the work. What work? Work is work. We doing the work. We living, we working, but there's this, I've always been disgruntled. I've always been disgruntled by what's going on in theater. I have felt like, frankly, that I had to implement it on my own I've implemented it in my work and around my work. I created rules of engagement around my work. I created, like audience response, declarations and whatnot, and I've like tried to curate nights of, how to get my people to my shows. And I've been speaking about Jim Crow theater. And, like, these are things that I've been sort of agitated about for a long time. And I thought I was sort of maybe in a space that was not popular and not welcome, really. That thinking was a little bit annoying maybe, or just wasn't something everybody could get caught on, catch the bus on. And so now that I'm learning, oh no, a lot of people do feel this, I'm learning people's stories, fellow playwrights, fellow actors, directors, theater workers of all kind, and their testimonies all across this year of the injustices that they've experienced. And I'm like, dang, I thought I was, we think we've been fighting this fight by ourselves for a long time. And now talk to some of my elders, and they have felt like they've been fighting the fight by themselves. And I'm like, well, we all think we've been by ourselves. That's because something has been missing. Like the cross connection of our movement and of our action has been missing. And I think what makes me what it does for me right now in this moment is it makes me not an activist imperialist, right? Like, I don't think I have the one way to be an activist, that I have the superior way of moving through this world as an activist. It makes me recognize the many different kinds of contributions that are necessary to move the spirit, move the day, move the tide forward. I think I guess I'm learning where I have been is not where I am now, where I need to go, for my own journey as an activist. And I can see people arriving now where I think I have been, some of this terrain is new. There's also a generation coming up right now that their activism and the things that, we just sat up here and said the unceded land we're on. That's not something I've ever, before 2020, ever done on a theater anything, right? Or we're like pronouncing our pronouns, and like this wasn't happening a few years ago, right? So there's a new wave of activism that's bringing in a new consciousness, right? That I appreciate, but I hope that it's connecting to the there's like these general things in activism that whatever the new issues are of the day, there's like these general things. This is globally, because I'm also I listen to global news, and I'm like, every day I'm like, it's just some frustrating stuff happening in the world, and I'm Haitian, and there's some frustrating stuff going on in Haiti. But I've been frustrated, but no one since I was a kid has given two shits about Haiti. I've grown up and people didn't even know where it was on a map, and it didn't used to be on the maps that I would study in school. So I've sort of been agitated, but I guess I'm hopeful and hoping that there's these general things globally that all activism, the traps of them and the successes of them. And I just hope that we're all learning from that.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Beyond thank you for that. Is just so much resonated with me. My goal for this conversation was to keep my voice out of the space as much as possible. And so, because it's really about hearing you all. Well, so much of what you're saying resonates with me, Dominique, just in terms of my own journey, that the moments when you begin to connect those dots to say that this activism thing is something that you just are, right? For some people, you just are. It's how you breathe. It's how you walk. It's how you love people. It's how you fight for the things that are critical and important to you. But there's something about you that logs onto those things that are critical and important to the world around you. You and I, Dominique in particular, we share Gwendolyn Hardwick and Carmen, who was just so pivotal, as an elder, and helping to solidify these ideas, particularly coming out of Black arts movement, around what does it mean in your art, or people like Peggy Austin, who was just like, you can perform anywhere, which was like about reclaiming space, and not being limited to, I have to be in a white space, in a white theater, the way I've been taught that theater is supposed to be. She's like, you can tell them stories. Tell them, baby, tell them. She's real alive with it. So there's something so critical about what you all are saying about how you move in the world in a different way. Activism, artistry, beingness expands. It can be this big or this big, this big, this big, whatever that ends up needing to be for you, or what the universe and the world requires for you to press through, whether it's in your family or the places that you work, that I find just so powerful about what you all are saying and recognizing and offering in this moment. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm also curious about, even though you all know each other and you have engaged with each other as artists in various ways, are there like any curiosities that you have about each other? I'm curious. Yeah, let's lean into that.
We all looked at each other like, oh. Well, let me think. Curiosities about it. Yes.
Curiosities about
that word is a strong word.
I'm gonna let y'all kind of, work with what that fully means for you.
I have one. I do have one. Can I share my curiosity with both Azure and Jonathan? Maybe it's coming off of, maybe it's connected, but not exactly to what I just said. So, but I'm curious as to how you all respond to the same thing that I was just talking about. So like that idea of how activism can feel. I'm wondering if you guys ever feel that it can feel sometimes in that activist space that it can get into this. The same stuff can happen in an activist space that happens in a, just like a theater space, like an acting space, the same drama that happens at the club, the same, like the same, and the same dynamics can happen. I guess that's what I'm really talking about. Like these dynamics that happen in the world that activists are actively combating can also happen inside of activist relationships to each other. Are you all experiencing that, or are you witnessing that? And do you have any, I don't know. Are you navigating that in any way?
So I will say yes, and yes, 100%. I will say that especially at the beginning of COVID, especially I was part of, I am still a part of it, but I was part of this PSAB group, and it was with white allied folks who wanted to learn how to do anti-racism work, and it was with also some POC folk, and there was some damage that was done. We didn't find collectively, because I was also a part of it, we didn't find the courage to name the violence until really until after the George Floyd moment. It was like almost like the water had gotten too high and the pressure had gotten too thick that it was almost like when me and my circle of friends in New York, we've talked about how like when he called out for his mother, he was like calling out for all of our mothers. And there was a kind of an ebo, a kind of a religious release that really awakened a burgeoning for all of our spirits who are left to hold the torch up, to gain access to things that we have never gotten access to before. And part of that is courage. Part of that is kind of a resiliency. So to your question, yes, I've experienced it 110%. And the only way that I have learned how to combat it is to own my contribution inside of either supporting it, being a part of it, and contributing to it. So like I had to sit with, and I think this moment of the shutdown really gave me the time to do it, even though I felt like I did not take a break at all. I mean, like the notion that artists took a break during this period is a lie. Like we worked 10 times harder than I think we ever did in our entire like career lives, trying to either figure out how to maintain ourselves or trying to figure out how to sustain a craft, a institution or way of being, so that there could be a moment for culture to come back. That's a side note. But the way in which I was able to combat it was really calling myself in and calling the friction in and naming my contribution to it, and then saying, I own that I might be doing anti-Blackness work. However, you did some supremacist work. And where do we come into relationship around there?
Yes. So my answer is also yes. So there's this thing that happens where activists or people who are really well known for a particular kind of work, like perhaps social justice work, perhaps artwork, they can have a really large impact on a large group of people, but their personal life is raggedy, nasty, and messy. And again, for me, it's talking about like the connections between people, right? Like you may get a concept, like you understand systemic racism, but you actually don't understand how that functions in your relationships, right? And you could apply that to any ism. So I feel like, you know, when the rubber hits the road, a lot of people are disappointing. Now, I won't say, I will first acknowledge that I am a Virgo, and so I'm frequently disappointed. And secondly, we'll acknowledge that, right, people, we say progress, not perfection, right? Like, I'm not expecting people to be perfect. That being said, there's been a whole lot of raggedy, just whateverness happening in these streets, right? Like within community, right? A lot of feeling surprised, right? Interpersonal relationships, romantic relationships, right? Also like looking at the way that people talk the talk, but you know, do they fuck the fuck, right? So for me, that's all political.
Have not heard "fuck the fuck," but I
just
incorporate it into the vocabulary. Thank you for coining things.
That just totally changed. I was like, oh, talk, walk the. Oh no, fuck the. All right,
I just wrote it down.
New level. I appreciate being the bar being raised. Thank you for that.
I mean, I feel like it needs to be said because it's said a lot of times quietly, quiet as it's kept. You know, I love a good Toni Morrison quote, but you know, and so these are the things that in your hardest and darkest days, how do you interact with people, right? How do you treat other people? That is the test, right? It's not about like the statements you can write and the intentions you can have and grab from the air. Here are my intentions. They are all good. I bless you with my good intentions. You know, so yeah, I mean, I think that we need to really be looking at that, you know, and that includes like, you know, circles, like how do we work with each other intergenerationally? How do we work with each other across difference, you know? How do we pull in compassion? How do, you know, how do we combat ableism? And I can't talk about that really enough because it's so insidious, particularly in the theater community, I mean, just everywhere. But it's just like, come on, little things like, you know, our people as a whole don't have good blood sugar. Why are you letting this meeting run over? Where are the snacks? Can you let a sister have some crackers? Stop snatching the crackers out of the elder's hands. You know her sugar is whack. You know, stuff like that. It's just like, stop being so obsessed with being good and proper and in control and really think about what people need and how we can move forward together. So that's what I'll say on that.
And just to uplift, because I really appreciate what you're bringing up, Azure, is also the conversation around like, are you willing to get messy? Like this idea of not striving for perfection, right? Like I used to wear this pendant now I keep it around just because I want to be reminded that I'm not, that is a supremacist way of being. But it was like, it was a pendant that I used to wear all the time, said, I am Black excellence. And during the pandemic, I sat with and said, what does excellence actually mean? Who is actually arbiter of excellence? What does that actually mean to name something as excellent? Why can't it just be Black? Why can't it just be? Why can't it just live, right? And what does it mean when we allow for the supremacy of our POV to dictate and author and curate our actual space of activism, our actual space of what utopia looks like, our actual space of what it means to take care of one another? And I think that, and I think to your point and what you brought up, like they might be able to theorize it all, but can they actually live it? Can they actually live the theory that they talk about so that it actually becomes part of a daily life practice? And that goes back to like this very necessary sensibility of like, do you love yourself? At the end of the day, do you actually love yourself beyond the theories that you profess?
Antonio, this just reminded me of you and I co-facilitating workshops together at Creative Arts Team. Jonathan, I'm like 3 out of 4 of these people on this panel here have been facilitators at Creative Arts Team. Not to give them a shout right now, but I'm just saying it's something coming from social justice theater work. This conversation. I appreciate you allowing us to engage and questioning each other, not just answering your questions. Thank you for doing that. No, really, because I was like, oh, I got questions. Thank you for offering some co-facilitatorship to me.
Absolutely. I mean, but that's the world that created us, right?
Yeah.
That it is community trying to dig in with each other, elbows at the table, like what? And it gets messy because it has to, right?
Well, I have a question now, curiosity.
Okay, go ahead.
My curiosity is that the light just was shut down all of a sudden, totally shut down. The industry, a whole way of being was just shut down just like that. And I didn't think it would turn on just like that as quickly because of the amount of emotional and psychological and grieving that took place without actual public grieving, right? There was a lot of internal siloed grieving that was happening during this period. And so I'm just wondering, how are y'all dealing with the lights being turned on so fast? Because I can say that with the lights being turned on so fast for me, my head is spinning just a little bit and I'm getting trying to figure out how to manage this Zoom culture life that I had been accustomed. Now I feel like I've adopted and been accustomed to, and trying to navigate this IRL life that wants to say, be back, and produce product for me again. It's kind of like, I almost want to say fuck you. It's just like I don't want none of y'all. Like y'all rude and disrespectful because in one moment you cut me off. In one moment you shut me down. In one moment you told me that me coming into contact with somebody else was a violent act, and you said I need to be socially distant from everyone. You trained my brain to think that I should not. And then in one blink of a moment, you are telling me that's done. I need you to get back to producing for me because, from my vantage point, there is a social economic group of people who enjoyed this period, and I do say enjoyed this period from a space of opulence and luxury, and they are now ready to re-engage with the life that they had before. And they run the economic engines of our livelihood. And because they want to say go, we are now having to press go, even though there is a slew of the economic engine who are us, who are dealing and riddled with a psychic trauma that is not being given a salve. And we're being asked to act like it never happened, but it did happen. So my question to you is, how are you dealing with the light being turned on just as fast as it was shut down?
I want to speak to that because I'm a playwright who's about to get produced, right? My show was on Broadway. My musical was on Broadway. It got eclipsed right in the middle of us about to have 1 year, right? And then we're coming back. And I have listen, it's not a secret. I could tell you all my tricks and my secrets and my disgruntledness, But I'm very actively trying to push for changing the way that model works, but I'm also recognizing I'm trying to change a model that's built on a very capitalistic structure, and it's very, how much of that can we put our energy into? How much of that can I go, hey, I really want to change this thing that wasn't really built, is running the way it was built. So either I want to change it, I want to change the whole thing, or I want to create some kind of ripple in this effect, right? So in my own individual activism, I'm always about looking for my little bitty ripples, right? But where the larger zeitgeist can participate into this culture, I think is we're trying to say, how do you hold this field accountable to its harms and its harms against us, because that pick up and go that you're talking about, Jonathan, is part of that pick up and go happens whether it's a pandemic or whether you break your leg on a show. Pick up and go. I've seen artists and fellow beloved cast members of my own show, have that pick up and go because the producers and the director and everybody's pushing we got to get this thing going. And I have to remind them, especially over the pandemic, but I remind them, I always remind you. Right. And so I was reminding them during and after. Do you remember this artist that broke their voice on our show. Remember how he was hurting? Remember how his voice was hurting? And you were like, let's go. Now we're going to center that. We're going to think about that person right now before we come back. Or what we're gonna do is the cast that you don't listen to, you're gonna have a conversation with that cast. You need to check in with that cast before you start announcing everything and getting tickets sold. What's going on with your team? Remember that Black Lives Matter statement that you wrote? I've had to tell very big entities, very big visible entities, I cannot do your panel right now because you want me to talk about you want me to be your face of, I am a part of your anti-racism work, and I am not really, so I cannot do the outward facing presentation for you. I will need to see what you're going to do. Call me in a couple months, but I can't do it right now because that's just not, I can't be part of your presentation. And while we all know, listen, we're all having conversations with each other across digital technology, in the name of sponsored by theaters, and they want to have these conversations and they want to have, like we're doing right now, and I respect them. I respect the artists who are inside of those institutions and the theater workers, because they're not all artists, but the theater workers that are inside of those institutions that have been pushing for those changes. So I don't crap all over, people's efforts to come back, because I know some of that effort to come back is about we are trying to come back to change. But I am also a part of 7 Black playwrights, right? Is it 7, 9? I've heard 2 different numbers. I don't know which one, but let's say between 7 and 9 Black, playwrights, directors and such having their work produced on Broadway as we come back, right? It concerns me. It concerns me that I'm in that, when I'm in that number, I have to individually, I'm fighting for what does this mean? How we going to use, once again, can't be the face of, sorry, won't be the spokesperson for the initiative that has yet to happen. Right. But I'm also just concerned because I get nervous. And I've been nervous with the whole wave of Black playwrights being produced. I'm happy. I want Black playwrights to be produced. I'm just concerned at the way that they're being produced in theater over these last couple of years. I don't like throw a dice, see if a playwright hits, don't hit, because I go, uh-oh. And what happens if they don't hit? Then what, they gone? We done? You're not investing in artists. You're using us for cover. That's not cool, So I am concerned about what it means, Jonathan, I guess, in the short version of your answer. I'm just concerned about what that means for workers' rights, for labor rights, for how we're looking at, I am concerned about the capitalist machine that theater gets caught in. But specifically, I'm speaking on the Broadway machine, because part of that dictation of when we come back is dictated by, the Broadway League, that's dictated by Broadway producers and all deciding when their shows should come back, including all of our producers, any of us that's been produced. And so they get into a room and they make those decisions. And then everybody else follows suit all across the New York City theater anyway, not necessarily national theater, because what we do in Detroit is not necessarily predicated by that, right? What's happening in Chicago theaters may or may not be predicated by that, or over in Minneapolis, right? But in New York City, it's dictated by Broadway. And so I think that to have an expectation of Broadway that it is not a capitalist machine is a very unrealistic expectation. So then it's like, okay, this is like having an expectation. I've been working in Hollywood for the past few years. And I'm telling you, I get very okay, Hollywood to pretend that Hollywood is not a capitalist machine is to frustrate yourself on a daily basis, right? Because if you think you're doing art for art's sake in Hollywood, you are fooled, So now you're going to have to say, okay, I am doing art and I'm pushing an artistic agenda, because it's art or bust for me. But that is not what it is for everything else. So I'm pushing an art or bust to executives, to Broadway producers who came over here from, working on Wall Street. I am not talking to my peers. I'm not talking to them. I'm having a different conversation. And so what am I here? Why am I in these spaces? What am I here to do? I'm in those spaces for the visible moment, so to help launch a conversation. I can get a moment to get a conversation going, then I'm gonna push for that. But it's not enough. So for me to get inside of this fast cog, this get back to work, let's everybody come back to work thing, for me it is exhausting, and I hope that it's not stopping our energies out there. There's so many energies out there right now. So many different activist energies out there right now. Whether they like each other, they don't. Whether this activist can't stand that activist, this movement don't like that movement, who cares? You know, that what breaks my heart on a daily is like the when I see history repeating itself in either Black movements or adjacent Black movements, right? Like when I see things, history repeating itself, and I go, I just don't know if people are they can quote all the books y'all talked about, you know, they can do all the reading, but and when you talk about that lived experience, I go, do they even know? Have they lived activism long enough? Have they talked to their elder activists? Like, do they know what trap they're going right into? Like, do they see it? Are they, you know, that will break my heart. But whatever it is, I hope that all of those energies, those collective energies out there, whether they decide to work together or to work separately, that they are not gonna stop or take their feet off the gas. That's what I hope. I hope that they won't stop and take their feet off the gas to hold this industry accountable. Sorry, that was long. I'm gonna be quiet for the rest of the time.
Not, but necessary. And the fullness of your thoughts and your ideas is essential. So, Azure.
Yeah. I'm noticing the time, so I'll try to keep this brief. But I will say that, you know, the lights were turned off. I think that we spent a lot of time, you know, navigating our own feelings, our own grief. I had a show that was up. It was a world premiere, and it was my first world premiere at next door at New York Theater Workshop that was closed by COVID, and on queer night, no less. So all my queer friends were like, we had tickets, and I'm like, and I just had to spend a couple of weeks really just like by myself, managing my mind to keep myself safe, you know, through that time and to be able to pivot. And I thought my career was over. It wasn't actually. But I'll say that, you know, we spent a lot of the time in the dark when the lights were out, noticing the roaches, right? All the little bugs and things, just like problems in our industry, right? We're calling them out. It's like, oh, racism, oh, ableism, you know, and then the light got cut back on and the roaches were still there, right? So I feel like there's a lot of like producing institutions, like what were y'all doing that whole time besides issuing press releases? Like what were you doing? You know, like talk to me about budgets. I'm also an arts administrator. Like I understand a budget. Talk to me about what you were doing, you know, like fiscally. Talk to me about how you were treating your employees or people you had to furlough. Talk to me about capital improvements, right? Like, hell, did you clean? Did you clean the theater? Like, did you clean the bathroom and put some new Charmin in there? You know the bathroom we're talking about, because we have some scary bathrooms here in New York City theater. And so I think the other thing that's happening, though, is the light gets cut on and someone, you know, an emerging writer like myself is just like, oh, okay, so I guess ain't nobody gonna do my show then. I guess, like, you know, I will say that production, that company, Parody Productions, is actually going to record the show and stream it online so that it can finish, so that I can have an end. But there's, for me, every time there's an announcement about a season, I'm just like, oh, okay, so y'all was trying to read my work, but ain't nobody interested in. Except for Mount Holyoke. Okay, Mount Holyoke, you're doing one of my plays. So that's how I feel about it. I'm just like, and COVID ain't over. COVID is not over. And so people, please put your masks on. Stop breathing all up in each other's faces. Please get your vaccinations and pay attention to these variants, because we are not done with this thing. It's not done with us.
Thank you, Azure. I appreciate you all, and particularly on that last note, Azure. I want you all to be safe. I think that we forget that we live in a place of privilege. I have friends across the globe who do not have access to vaccines, and if they do, they're not free. You know, so please protect yourself and protect others. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel discussion. I thank all the panelists for being a part of saying yes, because you ain't have to. You ain't have to. Thank you, Tyrone. for the shout out, the call to be a part of this wonderful moment, because it's not a moment, it is a movement. Bam! See how I worked that in there? I didn't even know I could do that. So immediately after this discussion, those who have tuned in, who are watching, please slide on over to Senate Theater Group's website to check out Duat, which will be starting screening at 5. I want to give a shout out to Caesar Williams, who introduced me, who introduced this moment, and the work that he's doing in New York with the Fire This Time Festival. We give gratitude for all the work that is happening. As we slide out, good people, any last parting words that anybody wants to contribute? Any thoughts? Going.
I'm sorry that I ended up. They tried to get me every time I talk that stuff. They get me listening. They listen.
But you got it all out though.
They listening. I'm sorry, Angela, I disappeared. Whatever last wisdom you was dropping, it's a conspiracy and they try to get us. But I just appreciate the wisdom of this cohort, and I just, and I'm inspired, to keep this joint going, because it gets thick out here and you get tired. I think I am just what you're hearing in all of my disgruntled. I have said that word about 5 times now, but that is because I think you get tired. I get tired. I have personally gotten tired, and I recognize my tired and my potential burnout. And so I feel ignited by, the passions and the intellect and the inspiration of other people. So thank you for relighting the flame. Thank you, all of you guys.
Self-care. Massive love. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, your evening, your afternoon. And don't forget to slide over to the show, Duat, 5 p.m. on the Senate Theater Group's website. Shay.